Welcome to Friday with Friends, the Friday episode of UnPerfect, where I get to pick the brains of some amazing new and old friends here on the UnPerfect Podcast. Today in episode number 57, I get to hang out with the fun, wise, and so type A, it's amazing we're friends, Jody Allen. Jody is a mom, an author, a speaker, a ministry leader. She's on staff at her church where she serves as the director of women's ministry and first impressions. She's a mom to 21-year-old college-age twins and a geriatric black lab. Jody enjoys Sunday afternoon naps, a good laugh, and mint chocolate chip ice cream. She's a fan of home-cooked meals that someone else cooks. I can totally relate to that. And most days you can find her procrastinating or still trying to master the skill of parking her car straight. And I hope when she masters it that she'll teach me. Jody has been on the podcast before, but is going to be talking about something very different and very necessary today. So listen in. Jody, welcome back to UnPerfect.
Thank you, Shelly. I'm happy to be back.
Well, good. I just have to ask, have you been hiking much since our hike from Hades a few weeks ago?
Absolutely not. It was too hot and too steep with too many bugs. No way.
Yeah. No. Y'all, we got lost. We had to keep stopping so that Shelly, could breathe. Like, I really felt like I needed an inhaler. And I think that was supposed to be an easy hike at Ridgecrest. But, yeah.
It was not easy. Mind you, it would have been a little easier if we had paid attention to the signs.
Well, this is true. There's signage can be important. But sitting down to mint chocolate chip ice cream and funnel cake fries made it all worth it. So
it absolutely did.
Covered the multitude of sins that may have been committed on the trail. Well, it was fun to see you in person a few weeks ago, but I'm super excited to have you here today because you have a book coming out soon. And I would imagine that it was a difficult one to write for many reasons, but I really feel like it's going to be one that brings hope and courage to a lot of women out there. So the title is Hidden Heartache, Finding Courage When Your Husband Struggles with Pornography. So can you just kind of start off and tell us why you wrote this book?
Well, there are so many Christian women around the country, probably really around the world, that are living with that hidden heartache. They've discovered their husband has been watching pornography and they're too scared and they're really just too ashamed to do something about it. And I was one of those women. And, you know, the rule of thumb is when you write is you just write what you know. And that's what I know. And so I wrote from my own experience so that other women will know that they are not the only ones. Because when you first discovered it, it feels like that you are the only ones, but there is a statistics, Covenant Eyes, which is the internet filter. They have a rather extensive report on pornography. It's like 30 to 40 pages. And they report that 64% of self-identified Christian men watch pornography at least once a month. And that's almost 2/3 of Christian men who are watching pornography. So that means that they have women in their lives, that 2/3 of those women are touched by pornography. And that is a lot of women. So if you think about your friends, it's likely 2 out of the 3 of your friends have this issue going on in their home and they're not saying anything about it. Or maybe they don't even know about it yet. But also in that same report, it specifically reports that statistics on pastors and youth pastors, 1 in 7 pastors and 1 in 5 student pastors use pornography on a regular basis. So I wrote this book partly to help those women know that they are not the only ones.
Yeah, absolutely. Those statistics kind of blow me away. Like, I knew it was high and I knew it was prevalent and I knew it was an issue. But yeah, when you look at it like 2 out of 3, you know, I'm envisioning us sitting in worship at church and like, you know, that 2/3 of the people there are affected by it. Like you said, the men and the women that are in their lives. So,
Well, and I also wrote it for, probably several other reasons really, but I think when God takes us through something difficult, it would be stingy not to use the comfort that we received and not use that to help one another. And that's what 2 Corinthians tells us to do, that God comforts in our trouble so that we can comfort others. And there are plenty of women who may not seek the help that they need and they may stumble on my book. And I want to be that voice that gives them hope. Because there are a few books like mine that are written on the same topic. And I just want the collection of our voices who have walked that road to be the collection of voices that point them to Jesus during their desperation. But I also wrote it because the subtitle is about courage, because I wrote it because a lot of women are struggling with shame and they feel humiliated. And the enemy holds men captive to pornography because of shame. But the same thing happens to the wives, because we don't want to be humiliated, because there's so much stigma around the subject of pornography. In fact, I am working with a friend of mine on just having like a launch party for the book. And in going back and forth in an email, she said, I really just struggle just typing the word pornography because there is so much stigma. But also, another reason that I wrote it is because of all the books that are written for wives, by wives, for wives, whose husbands struggle with pornography. There are a lot of those couples that are still married, which is a gigantic win for sure. But that is not the case with me. And I want women to know that they can make it through this difficult season in their lives. And it is a difficult season. It's just a season. They are going to get through it. We are going to get through it, but they can make it through and be whole and happy on the other side of it, even if it doesn't turn out the way they hoped it would. So I just felt like there needed to be a different voice that says you can still be happy, even if your marriage doesn't survive.
Yeah, that's so good. And I love what you said just about just that you don't want to waste your pain. You don't want to waste your tears. We're like, okay, if I had to go through this, I want someone else to maybe not have to go through to the extent of what I did.
Right.
Yeah. And what you were talking about, shame, that's such a bondage for so many people in so many different areas, but it really, it's how Satan just kind of keeps us in the, stuck in the ground. So, yeah, that's huge. Well, I'm very grateful that you were courageous enough to write the book, and the accessibility of pornography is crazy to me. And you know this, you have a son, I have 3 sons, and it's like, you just about can't let them out of the house. Like it is, it's even in the house. It's in the house.
Right.
At the touch of a click, there's so much accessibility. So what would be some of the signs that someone you love is experiencing an addiction to pornography?
I feel like I want to mention some of the signs that I experienced, but also maybe some of the ones that I didn't experience. And some of these signs could be pornography, but it might not be pornography. So I just want to say that. But just if your husband is doing these things, that doesn't necessarily mean it's pornography.
Sure.
One is just locking the bathroom door and spending a lot of time in the bathroom. If you've got a toddler running around your house, of course you don't want a 2-year-old busting in the bathroom. But I think that can be a red flag if men are spending a long time in the bathroom and not making eye contact. This was the case for me when our neighbor asked me, have you ever noticed that your husband didn't make eye contact with other people? And that was a sign that he was just struggling with shame. And he just didn't want to look people in the eye. So not making eye contact and really not going to bed at the same time. And, a husband can say, I'm, staying up working, or there's no really easy answer to that, because some people are night owls, some people are morning person. But I feel like going to bed at the same time is really, really important, because when one spouse is up and the other one's in bed, it just is a recipe for disaster. And maybe not even coming to bed at all. I know that eventually was the case for me. I would wake up in the mornings and the other side of the bed would still be made. And my husband eventually did not come to bed. So that is a sign. And a change in sex drive, maybe wanting more or wanting less, or avoiding intimacy altogether. Or having, this is a little too graphic, but having issues with arousal. That means his needs are met in other places. So he doesn't need you for that. Or having a husband who is emotionally distant or checked out. I kind of felt like, and I expressed this before, felt like that we were the library, checking in and checking out. And on the days that I felt like he was checked in are the days that he was probably not acting out. And so he didn't have that shame, so he could feel more checked in.
Right.
So there was a lot of checking in and checking out. And then maybe a change of personality or antisocial behavior. In my case, my husband, he used to be the life of the party. He was really fun and exciting and it just made people laugh. And then as the addiction progressed, I remember we would invite people over and I would ask him, are you going to talk? Because I felt like I was the one having to really hold the conversation, which was very different than what I had experienced in the past. And addiction does change your brain. So it does change your personality. So that is definitely a change of personality was one that I experienced. And just being defensive or having a secret email address, or if there's a lot of anger or indifference, or erasing the history on the computer, that's an obvious red flag. Or there's a change in a financial pattern, or just maybe your husband is critical of your appearance. You're not wearing enough makeup, or you're not wearing the right clothes, or something like that. So I feel like those are probably some basic signs, and maybe some that we wouldn't even think of, that would be signs that there might be a pornography issue in the home.
Right. And again, it's interesting how much shame plays a role in even the way that they respond, the way that they that it's changing who they are.
Right.
So can you give us, we don't want to give everything away, because I do, if someone is struggling with this, or this is something that's resonating with them, hopefully they're going to grab your book and get all the good stuff. But can you give us maybe a few practical takeaways from your book? Something that maybe a woman who's struggling in this situation, what's something they can do right now today?
Well, what good is a book if you don't have anything practical to take away from it? So I feel like, so at the end of every chapter, I have something called a call to courage. And that's just a baby step that women can take to move them forward in their healing and also in their faith. And I think the first practical takeaway is choice. Women have a choice. Just like we have a choice in whether we exercise or how we spend our time or what we eat, we have a choice to be victims to this situation. It's terrible. It's devastating, but we get to choose. And so I start the book out really just inviting women to step out of shame and make a conscious decision to address the pornography issue in their marriage. Because truly, a wife can discover the issue, she can and choose to never do anything about it. Or she can do some things, but never really get to the root of the problem, which really was the case with me, and porn kept surfacing throughout the years. So I think just choosing to do something about it is a good choice to make today. Like just choosing that you can do something about it. And I think the next thing really is telling somebody, which, because there's so much shame involved, nobody really wants to tell anybody, because we work so hard as Christian women to make it seem like that we've got it all together. And when we tell somebody, it's clear we don't have it all together. And Satan works in secrecy. And so he uses shame to keep us from telling other people. Now, we don't need to blast it on social media, but we do need to choose that trusted friend and tell a trusted friend. And, finding out that our husband struggles with pornography is it's humiliating. And that is just something clear that we have to work through. Honestly, Shelley, even now, 8 to 10 years later for me, that is still a struggle for me. When I posted on social media the title for my book, which has the word pornography in it, I felt so much embarrassment just wash over me all over again. Because I don't want to be known as a lady who wrote a book about pornography. And I would much rather had written a book about love or kindness or peace. But we all have a story to tell. That's the story that God's given me. And so in telling my story, I'm inviting other women to tell theirs, because that truly is the only way forward. I think one other practical thing that women can do is that I have in the book as a call to courage at the end of one of the chapters is just learning how to express our feelings in a positive way. I grew up most of my life just acknowledging 3 basic feelings. You're mad, you're sad, or you're angry. And there are more complicated feelings than that. And when we face a difficult season, as you know, those feelings just kind of bubble to the top, and we have to work through those feelings. So when I finally decided enough was enough and that I had to work through my own feelings. And so my husband had gone to a treatment center to receive treatment for his addiction. And while he was there, they had a family weekend. And I went to the family weekend. And while we were there, we had the opportunity to express how we felt to them, but we had to do it in a very specific way, in a very life building way. I don't know if life building is the right word, but in a constructive way. So they gave us a feelings wheel, which I love feelings wheels. And they sent us off to spend time sorting through our feelings. But we just had to say our feelings in a particular way, in a particular format. And that format was this: I feel blank. And then you fill in your feeling about blank because. So I sat at McDonald's for 2 hours going through that feelings wheel, trying to come up with every feeling that I could possibly think of how I felt. And so I just want to read a couple of the examples that I wrote. I feel helpless about your actions because there's nothing that I can do or say to make you change or to make better choices or to make you engage me. Or I feel discouraged about your actions because I see you continue to focus on yourself and your desires instead of cherishing our marriage and what we could be together. And then just another one, which if a woman is in that situation where they have experienced this more than once and it's come up in their marriage several times, they might resonate with this one. I feel skeptical about your recovery because I have heard many years of empty promises. So I think that is a practical step that women can do. And that is just learning how to acknowledge their feelings and learning how to express those for their clarity, but also to help with communication. So that's a simple thing that women, I feel like, can do today.
That's interesting that's what they use, because when we were doing family therapy for trauma with our whole family, but because of the trauma that our adopted kids had experienced, that's exactly what she taught us to use. I feel blank about blank and because blank. And so the kids were little and she was teaching them, like we would use Uno cards. And so if the card, like we'd go around, we weren't really playing Uno, but if you played a yellow card, then you had to say a feelings word. Pick any feelings word, like just to practice saying the ones that weren't just like what you said. I'm mad, I'm angry, or whatever. If you got us another color, you had to do the whole thing. And you would just say, you could even make something up. It was just to practice using that. So that's interesting. Yeah. So if you don't mind, give us some other, I think these practical takeaways are going to be very, very, very helpful for people.
Well, I think one other thing that women can do really is to seek a qualified counselor. And I mean qualified. My experience, I actually had two different counselors. I had a Christian counselor that helped me walk through more of the spiritual side of it. But I also had a CSAT, which is a certified sex addiction therapist. And so I feel like if women can seek that out, that they can really help them. Counselors can really help them walk through the pain, but also on our end. And that is just do the thing that refreshes you. If that's taking a nap, or if it is playing the piano, or if it's baking. I have a friend of mine who always encourages me to be sure that I am replenishing myself. And I don't feel like until I went through this, the word refreshing and replenishment was really in my vocabulary, but she really encouraged me, and she still does that today, just to make sure that I'm replenishing myself. So I feel like that is something that women can do that would be so, so helpful. But then I think there are a couple of practical spiritual takeaways that women can do. And one of those is praying scripture. When my husband was away at the treatment center, they gave us, I think, 5 verses that we could pray. So me and my kids at night, we would get around our island and we would pray those verses. And so I am just a big fan of praying scripture. And sometimes we don't even know what to say, or we're just emotionally exhausted and the words aren't coming. And so we can just use God's words. And absolutely. An example of that maybe is like John 8:32, which is you just say the verse and it's another fill in the blank. Let's make it easy. It's a fill in the blank. May Shelley know the truth and be set free. That's from John 8:32. Or Ezekiel 36:26. Give Shelley a new heart and put a new spirit in her. Take out her heart of stone and give her a tender heart instead. And it might even be helpful to set a wallpaper on your phone for a verse. But I feel like praying scripture, it just takes the guesswork out of praying. And we know that we're praying God's word. And one other takeaway, if I can give one other takeaway, and that is worship. And I'm not one of those people who have music playing in their house all the time. Some people turn on the TV as soon as they get home. And I'm not really one of those people that have background noise. But when pornography surfaced in my marriage, when we separated, I made it a habit every day when I got downstairs, I just turned on the Christian radio station and let it play in our house all day long. Now, for some people, that might be too much noise. But for me, it was just a way that I could refocus and shift my focus from my problem to Jesus, who is our problem solver. So I think that's a practical thing that women can do just to get their focus in the right place.
Yeah. And it may be, you needed a different kind of noise at that time, because maybe the noise in your head was just, you couldn't stop thinking about it. You couldn't stop over processing whatever.
Yes. So much overthinking, Shelley. So much overthinking.
And I love what earlier on when you said, you basically alluded to, we don't get to choose our own story. We get to choose whether we're going to use it and share it. And so you said the exact words that another guest of mine has said, Teresa Whiting, who has written a Bible study on, or out of her experience of sexual abuse. But she said the same thing. She said, I did not want to be the sexual abuse lady. Like, I want to talk about something else. So again, I thank you for being brave enough to share your story, because that is when we don't feel alone anymore. I know with things I've experienced in my life for so many years, thinking I'm just a bad wife or a bad mother because no one else is having trouble with this. And then, out of the woodwork, when you start realizing, oh my gosh, we were all struggling with this. We just, like you said, the shame kept us from wanting to share it. There's so much power in that.
And we just don't, and then we feel like we're alone.
Yeah.
And we're not.
No. So I'm sure you've learned a ton through this process, whether it's about yourself, relationships, addiction. What are a few things that you've learned that you can share with us and our listeners?
Well, I had to learn through my process in counseling to deal with my own trauma, the past and the present, and stop minimizing my pain. Because typically when something difficult happened to me, I would usually dismiss it and say, oh, somebody has it worse than me, which, is really true. There's always somebody that has it worse than me. And perspective is good, but I had to learn to acknowledge it and deal with my own pain, because my own pain is painful. And if I'm constantly dismissing it, then I'm really never working through it. So that was really pivotal for me. I also learned that some people give terrible advice. Like, some people just give terrible advice.
They do.
And you just can't listen to everybody. You've got to know who the wise people are and listen to the wise voices. The other thing is, as I said before, our marriage did not survive, and I am divorced, which was a very painful and, again, humiliating process, because I feel like in the Christian world, and I work in ministry at a church, and nobody is condemning me, but I feel condemned myself. But I think that what I realize is that divorce is not a death sentence. It's awful and it's hard, but I can make it through, because God loves divorced people too. And
He does.
He does. And one thing that we learned as we walked through that is that I parent differently because of the road that we walked. My kids would say, well, so-and-so has this. I'm like, we are Allens, and we do what the Allens do. So we were very diligent when it came to phones and social media. My kids had to read a book on social media, read the book. And then we spent probably 2 45-minute sessions going through that book so that they understood the pitfalls and the fun of social media.
Right.
So I just parent differently because of the road that we walked. And I feel like if you had a different issue in your house, if it was alcohol or if it was something different, then we probably all parent differently because of the road that we walked. And the other thing too is going through addiction, surviving addiction, healing from addiction is so expensive. But the thing that I learned is that we serve a God who is not broke. We serve a God who owns a cattle on 1,000 hills and who provides for us. And it was very expensive, but God was so generous to us and so faithful to us. So I truly can, there's a chapter in my book all about that, because I truly cannot I could not write a book without putting that in there, because God really was so faithful to us. But also I realized in all of that, I can do hard things. Beth Moore says, life is hard. You can do hard God's way, or you can do hard the world's way. So it's just going to be hard. So we get to choose our hard. So I can do hard things. I can do hard things. And that we all have a choice to make. We don't have to be victims. And that shame and humiliation, while it's awful and it feels awful, I don't like it, it's uncomfortable, but I can get through it. And through the process of counseling and separation and divorce, I had to take a long look in the mirror. And I think if you're living in the middle of it, maybe it's not the time for that, or maybe it is time. But sometimes the person that I see in the mirror is not the person I want to be. So I had to acknowledge and deal with the person in my mirror and my own struggles and my own faults and my own failures through that process. Those are some things that I learned along the way.
Sure. That's a lot. I love so much of what you shared. And it is interesting. You were talking about even the expense. I know with us, totally different scenario with the trauma of our kids, but for some reason, every treatment that was best for them was not covered by insurance. So it's like we were constantly going out of the box. He's faithful and he's good. And like you said, he loves you divorced. He loves you single. He loves you married. He loves you wherever you are. And his treasury is endless and he's for us. So that's huge. So what would be just one piece of either advice or encouragement, maybe encouragement would be a better word for it, can you leave with women today? And either, there's women listening that are going through this, we know, or they know someone who is. So what was one piece of encouragement that you could leave with our listeners today?
I think this is something I want to shout from my soapbox, that we do not have to leave this difficult season, whether it's pornography in your marriage, whatever that season is. We do not have to leave that season and just squeak by. We don't have to just survive. And I mean, right now, if you're living in the middle of it, it seems that way. But we don't have to get to the other side of our pain and our heartache and not flourish, because God has better things planned for us. Pornography doesn't have to win. My CSAT, which is the Certified Sex Addiction Therapist, asked me to write a letter to sex addiction or to pornography. And I mean, I thought it was a little weird, but I didn't. And I don't want to read the whole thing, but I just want to read you this one little portion of it. And so this is what I wrote. Lest you, talking about pornography, think the only things you have contributed to my life are negative. That is not so. What I have gained while dealing with you is more strength than I ever thought possible. My faith has blossomed, and I have learned to dig in my heels and press on with determination. While it may appear from the outside that you have won, I assure you with great confidence that indeed you have not won. You may continue your rampage of consuming and destroying the lives of many people, but emphatically refuse to allow that to be true of my life. The things you have taken away are slowly being replaced by greater and better things that can only be possible by my encounter with you. So it is with one word, I leave you, checkmate. Because we win. We serve a God of hope. And when the Israelites finally left Egypt after years of captivity, and they didn't leave empty-handed, the Bible says that they plundered the Egyptians, their captors. They left with treasures of silver and gold and clothes. Exodus 12:36 says that the Israelites took with them the best things of Egypt. So we as women who have encountered pornography in our relationship can take the best things from our time of suffering or our time in pain. It may not be gold, or it may not be silver or material things, but it might be a new perspective or a new friendship or a new skill or just a fresh start. If we know Jesus, we have the potential to get through to the other side of this heartache and be whole and happy on the other side of it, no matter how it turns out.
Oh, I love that. That is so, so powerful. And just that whole concept, Jesus said in John 10:10, I've come that they may have life and have it to the full. And that's kind of been my whole journey with UnPerfect, is figuring out, how do I do that? How do I really live in abundance and fullness of life, but in the midst of brokenness and in the midst of all this? So I love that. And I love the illustration of the Egyptians. That is so powerful. Hopefully, no matter where you are in your stage of struggle or grief, whether it's through addiction or something else, even being able to hold on to that, like, because I'm sure there were moments where you couldn't even fathom winning.
Oh,
like there
no.
were moments where you were like, that's not even possible right now. But to be able to hold on to that one day, you are going to be winning. You are going to be taking things from this you never knew possible. That is so powerful.
Yeah.
I love it. So good. So you have a great resource to offer our listeners. Can you tell us about that and how they can find it and how they can find you?
Well, you can find me I'm on Instagram and Facebook at Jody Allen Writes, or you can find me on my website, which is jodyallenwrites.com. And when you sign up for my email list on there, I have a resource called 15 Ways to Brave. And it is just some simple ways where you can take baby steps of bravery today. Simple things like saying no, because sometimes we need to say no, and that's the brave thing to do. But sometimes it's brave to say yes. Or maybe it's just brave to go out to eat by yourself. So I have some simple ways just to help us be more brave women.
I love it. And that can apply to anyone.
Yes.
I love it. Okay. So I will put links to that in the show notes and how to find you and everything else. But thank you, Jody, so much for being brave enough to be here and to be talking about this. Like you said, that is just, it's a weird topic to, like your friend said, to even type, much less talk about, but it's so important that we do, because this is where we are in our state of society. So
it is.
Thank you for sharing, and thank you for being here.
Well, thank you for being brave enough to address the topic.
I know you've heard some things today that have encouraged you or challenged you, or just given you some insight for what a friend near you may be going through. So I just pray that God uses it in your life and allows you to use it in the life of others. I've got the links in the show notes for the resources that Jody has, and her book will be coming out hopefully at the end of this month. So you definitely want to get on her email list so you will know exactly when it comes out, when you can order it, how you can order it. So all those links are in the show notes. As always, I'm praying that you are able to see glimpses of God's glory in the now and the not yet of your unperfect life. I'll see you next time.